And I'm back. I'm VT, and for the past 8 months, I've been working on my dream game. And throughout those 8 months, I've been stumped by bugs, problems, and issues unlike anything I've ever seen before. But nothing compares to the chaos I went through building this combat system. So sit back, relax, and let me show you how it all happened. But before that, you need to know a little bit more about my game first. It's basically an open world action adventure game with parkour, combat, stealth, and dynamic environmental interactions. It's also story driven and it has a lot of progression and superpowered abilities which are based on Jazz, and it might turn out to have a co-op and PvE competitive game mode. Hey, that's just me overscoping. I'll probably cut a lot of that out, but today we're focusing on just the combat. I already have a lot of the parkour and movement mechanics implemented. I can walk, run, jog, climb, vault, wall run, and a lot more. But before I start working on the combat system or any other new mechanic, I would love to design it in such a way that the existing mechanics complements or synergizes with the new ones. Like the little intro you guys saw, that air takedown punch can only be performed if you are high and far enough from a target, and the best way to meet that condition is by using the parkour mechanics like the wall run. So now that's settled, I wanted the combat to be like the secret love child of Spider-Man and The Last of Us 2 melee combat systems. And to achieve that, I needed to implement two things: the free flow combat and the dynamic environmental finishers. I started with the free flow combat because I thought that would be easier, but boy was I wrong. For those of you wondering, free flow combat is basically a type of combat system in games where the player can chain attacks between multiple enemies, which was popularized by the Batman Arkham games. So if we take a look at some combat gameplay from Batman or Spider-Man, we notice three main mechanics that make it all work. The selection, which is basically just picking the target which the player is going to attack. Positioning, which is basically moving the player over to the target. And the animation. Implementing the selection and positioning wasn't so hard, I just used the player's movement input. But it was time for the animations, which kinda took forever to do because I didn't have any attack animations. So I had to use the ones that came with the locomotion asset pack I was using, which was great and all, but it had one small issue. They were all made for runner games, you know, like Subway Surfers. So after the attack animation, it automatically transitions to running. I still used it anyways, and I did some pretty shady things to get it working. Anyways, it was time to actually make the enemies react. I did try using some animations from this free online library of hundreds of mocap animations and characters, which is called Mixamo. But the results from that ended up with a lot of foot sliding, and I was not vibing with that, so I had to bite the bullet and make some of the animations myself, which took quite a while, but hey, it turned out okay if I do say so myself. So the combat system started coming together. You could attack, you could pick targets and they would react to your hits, but it got boring fast. There was no challenge and the enemies felt static, which meant I had to face every game dev's worst enemy: AI. At first, I just made the enemies follow you and circle around you randomly, but I wasn't feeling it, so I needed a more sophisticated approach, which led me down a rabbit hole of research, and I got this new system working after a really long time. And in the new system, the enemies don't overwhelm the player no matter how many enemies you fight at once, but they also sometimes coordinate together and attack sequentially, or two enemies can attack together. And the rest of the non-attacking bots keep their distance and circle the player, and they only step in if they are needed. And enemies can also sneak in hits if the player gets too close to them. And enemies also keep their distance from each other, which eliminates this nasty clumping of bots that's noticeable in some games. And you wanna know the best part about this whole combat system? It's not tied down to the player. Literally any NPC in the game can be an attacker and a target, and everything just works. Best believe once the game is complete, there will be random encounters of NPCs beefing it out, or two NPCs can bump into each other and it could lead into a fight, and you as the player can step in or do what I like to do and just watch, you know, like a pervert. And I kinda got addicted to putting bots against each other and watching them fight, which distracted me from the next task for a while, which was a way to avoid those attacks. So now that my NPCs could attack, my player needs a way to dodge the attack, so I needed to start working on some sort of dodge mechanic, obviously. And this was where most of the bugs came from. It got so bad that my player combat state grew to over 1700 lines of code, but it was worth it because I figured it out. And now let me show you how it works. So here I am standing in the test map, and when I press the dodge button without any directional input, the player does the short forward dodge, and using the directional input is going to result in a dodge in the respective direction. Pressing the dodge button while under attack by an enemy would result in what I call the weave dodge, where the player bobs and slides around to the back of the enemy, leaving him exposed. I also added this, I call it the long dodge, and it can be performed with the same dodge button while holding down a modifier, which is set to right click on mouse and keyboard and left trigger on the gamepad by default. It's pretty similar to the normal dodge in terms of behavior, with the main difference being the rolls. They actually modify the player's hitbox so you can roll under things, and also the dodge distance being a lot longer, so it's really good for getting away from overwhelming enemies. You can also trigger these while sprinting, but for the normal dodge you can only dodge left and right, and you can still pretty much dodge in the 4 directions in the long dodge. So that pretty much covers the dodging in the game. But now it was time for finishers. So the first thing I did was to examine the games with cool finishers, which was when I came across this. I mean, this is pretty much one of the coolest moves in video gaming history. So it's settled, guys. We need to implement the air takedown, but first we need to break down the problem. But what exactly makes up this air takedown move? Well, first we need a way to detect targets, which we already have thanks to the free flow system. Next, we need to know if the player is high enough to perform the move, and we also need some kind of trigger, which we're just going to set to be at the press of a button. And we also need a way of syncing the two characters to position themselves and play their animations, all while the attacker is falling in a somewhat convincing way. That's not gonna be too hard, right?
Absolutely wrong.
So first things first, I need a punch animation. And luckily for me, the animation pack I was using comes with one, but it's not a takedown animation, so I needed to make my own. So I hopped into Blender and went straight to cooking. I spent a couple of hours on this and it was just not turning out how I expected. That's when I got another idea. I was gonna take the first punch animation and split it up into 5 parts, the main punch and 4 other animations, which are just some of the wind up key poses. Then I can just blend between the key poses as you approach the target and play the final animation once you're close enough. And I still needed to head back to Blender to make a hit reaction for this so I could play it at the same time of the punch so everything will sync properly. I didn't want to spend too much time trying to perfect the air takedown, so I just added that to the list and moved on to the next task. This didn't take me too long to implement, but as usual, my lack of proper animation slowed me down and caused this weird body part placement issue. I was still able to get these 3 takedowns. It's nothing too flashy, but it'll do as a proof of concept. And then it was time for the final task. This didn't take me too long to implement because I already had a system for detecting obstacles for vaulting, so I just piggybacked off that to make a system for detecting environments. And as usual, I don't have any animation, so I just made it print out whatever it detects. And then I went over to Blender to make at least one animation just for the wall takedowns to just see how this looks. It took me a while, but it's done. I mean, it ain't much, but it's honest work. So that'll do it for this video. It took a really long time to make because I had to develop all the mechanics first, which means the next devlog will probably take even longer. But you can keep up with the game if you join the Discord channel or follow the socials. Well, I gotta go touch some grass now, so I'll see you guys when I see you guys.